Hey guys, my name is Nick and welcome back to the channel, and in this video we are going to be going through a full build, magnetise and paint guide for the Thousand Sons Forgeworld Osiron Dreadnought. This is what the Forgeworld version looks like on their webpage. It is in 30k colours, so the old red and gold. I'm going to be painting up to match my current 40k Thousand Sons forces, to match my other vehicles and my existing Dreadnought as well, which you can see on the screen now. So very similar colour scheme to this, and that's what we're going to be going for. But this is going to be from original unboxing, how to check and how to prepare your Forgeworld resin ready for painting, and then go through all of the processes. It's a two-part video. This one's going to go build, magnetise, all the way up to the base coat, and then the second follow-up part of this will be finishing off all the detail work and basing. So without further ado, let's get straight into the video. So here we go then. This is the Forgeworld Thousand Sons Osiron Dreadnought. Now all the schemes on the Forgeworld page all have them in 30k colours, but this is perfectly acceptable to use as a regular Contemptor or Heretic Contemptor with the 40k version, and that's what I'm going to be painting mine up as to join the rest of my Thousand Sons. Unpackaging the little white box then that we get from Forgeworld is the quality check sheet, and you can see there how recent this was purchased. It was only a couple of weeks ago that I took delivery. Regular instructions then, so all the Forgeworld instructions these days are much better than they used to be. So these are computer-aided design instructions. If you are not too familiar, we get an exploded parts list on the left, and then we have the build instructions on the remaining pages. And each new section is colour-coded so you know what you're gluing and where you're going about it. Opening up the clamshell pack then, we get all the components. Lots of little bits and pieces. And what we're going to do now is just sort of make sure, the first thing you do with any Forgeworld kit, if you've seen any of my build guides on Forgeworld before, is to make sure that you've got everything. Forgeworld does occasionally make quality slip-ups, and you might get a bad cast, or you might be missing a component. But don't fear too much. If they are really that bad, simply take a picture of the box with the batch number on, a picture of the bad component, and email Forgeworld customer services, and they will replace it very, very quickly. Getting your tools ready then, I've got a razor saw and some clippers just to get rid of all the injection points, all these big triangular gates as part of the manufacturing process. Some of this can be done with a clipper. Just be very, very careful on the types of part you use the clipper on, because the action of clipping causes some tension through the resin and any thin parts could crack. So you want to be careful of that, and then use like a razor saw to get rid of some of these pieces like I'm showing here. You probably could have clippered this, but I prefer the razor saw. It's a nice flat edge, and we can cut through these little sections to release the torso from that injection gate. There is a lot of junk on the inside of this though, as we cut those gates out. They can be clippered out, and then you can follow up using your scalpel just to get rid of all of those. Most of it you won't see, but it will impede the posability and where that hip joint goes in. So we've got all the pieces all cleaned up now. I'm trying to get a bit of focus on this. You can see the detail on the Osiron. In my opinion, it is a little bit more expensive than the regular Contemptor for the Thousand Sons. But it does come with one arm option, which the other one doesn't. But the Thousand Sons iconography on this is way, way, way more. And you'll see this as we go through the build. So when I'm laying out all the pieces here, I do try and lay them out as per the diagram, just to double check that everything is here. And then we can sort of work out the build plan. A lot of bit of dry fitting going on, so you can see exactly where things go. So we've got the hip joint, and then we've got the sort of the torso piece. And just try and dry fit it just so you're comfortable where everything goes. And then you can plan your build, where you're going to drill, where you're going to glue, and that kind of thing. And especially where you're going to pin. I've got some gardening wire here, but a paper clip will do just the job. I find these a little bit more flexible, especially when it comes to doing legs and so on. The paper clips can be a bit hard to bend, but this is perfectly adequate. So I'm going to be gluing and drilling and pinning through the torso and the legs. It is optional. I just prefer it for that little bit of strength and peace of mind. And so just for the hip joint here, the top of the ball joint, and then the receiving socket within the torso is what I'm drilling out here. You haven't got to go too deep, sort of 3, 4, 5 millimeters maybe, and that's going to be your pinpoint for that wire. I'm using a 1 millimeter drill bit for this, and you can see there that the wire just fits in there. And then we're just going to cut that to length, so we've got sort of 5 mil in and then 5 mil poking out, and then we can test fit that to make sure that the receiving hole is deep enough to take that wire, or in which case we'll either drill a slightly deeper hole or we'll cut the wire to fit. The other piece that I'm pinning here is those hip joints, and I've pre-done that there. So that little piece with the cloth on is going to receive into the ball joints of each of those upper thigh pieces. Again, a little bit optional, but it is sort of the main weight bearing. If you want to call it weight bearing on these are very, very light kits, so you're probably not going to be overly worried about it. But exactly the same technique, drill through and pin. And then it's up to you how you want to pose it. So there are 2 different feet types. You get a raised toe on each side. They are slightly canted inwards if you look at the image there. So you get 2 flat and 2 toe up, and then you can just pose to your own content. A bit of trial and error if you've played around before, but I use a bit of blue tack just to sort of get the pose ready, and then it's just personal preference on how you want to do that, whether you want really striding, running forward, standing on terrain. It's just personal preference on the pose. A couple other fixed pieces that we can glue on then. There's a bit more iconography that goes on the headpiece here, so we're just gluing that on. And then we can move on to the arm. Now the arm just has 4 fingers, which are very simply glued on, exactly the same as the plastic version if you've ever built any dreadnoughts, but there is the Osiron blade which attaches to the bottom, and then those 2 pieces are extra bits of what do you want to call it, parchment, and I'm going to leave those off as we go through the build. Makes it easier to paint. Next up then are the arms. You get an upper arm, you get a receiving joint, you get an elbow joint, and then the weapon arm itself. And you can see how flexible that is with the pose. Again, just with the legs, it's a case of posing it as you see fit. I'm going to be magnetising as there are a number of different weapon options. The stats change on those weapon options pretty often, so I want to magnetise these so I've got full flexibility. I can chase the meta, or you can go with the rule of cool. To do that, I'm using 3mm by 3mm magnets. I'm going to drill a pilot hole with a 1mm drill, then switch it out to a 3mm drill, and that will form the piece here. Taking one of my other weapon option arms and one of my other builds of another different dreadnought, I want to make sure the orientation of those magnets is the same, so I can switch around between all of the different types of Contemptor that I've got. So taking a power fist arm and then an autocannon arm, you can see on the one I've built here, which is a standard Thousand Suns Dreadnought, you can see how that magnetises in. And then we're going to do the same orientation on the magnets with the other weapons. So what we're going to do is drill into that receiving piece there. Exactly the same on this one. Drill that pilot hole. And then I've got a heavy bolter that I'm going to be using on this guy just as an example. Comes in another clam pack just like this. All the other weapon options are exactly the same, and when you open them up, you get this little piece here, which is the key for the magnet piece, and then the rest of the weapon options. There's the elbow joint piece for the flexibility. We've got a drum magazine and the heavy bolter, or the twin heavy bolter. You can make this either left or right-handed, just depends what side you want to put the drum mag on. So you can either twist it around and put it on the left, if I don't throw it on the floor. And yeah, you can make it left or right-handed. I'm going to be making this one right-handed because the power fist that he comes with can also go either way, but I'm making it left-handed. When you put the shoulder receiving joint on, it is keyed slightly left or right, so you want to be wary of that. And when you pin this piece together like this into the upper shoulder joint, you can see the movement on this very similar to the power fist that I showed earlier. The first piece you want to put into the weapon arms then is that elbow joint, or the elbow flex joint there. That's the piece we're going to drill into for the magnet option. And then on the receiving shoulder joint, you want to put the receiver into there and glue that. So each weapon is now ready to be magnetised. And I'm going to just mark it with a scalpel blade so I know where the centre of that hole is. And then I'm going to proceed to drill approximately a 3mm hole. There is a little bit of a gap behind that, that's not a problem, but a 3mm hole with that 1mm drill bit. Once that's cleared out, we can do the same with all the other weapon options while we got that drill bit attached to the pin, vice drill, and just drill into there, again, about 3mm, because that's the depth of the magnet. If you've got 3x2, it's probably just as equivalent, just go 2mm deep, not a problem at all. And 3x2 will hold these weapons quite easily, but I've got a whole bunch of 3x3s that I've got for other projects, so I thought I'd use them. Then we switch over to the 3mm drill bit, and all we want to do is be very, very slow and careful with this. You don't want the drill to snag and to sort of go off center. So a very slow twist, clearing out all the resin as it comes out very, very gingerly, very carefully, keeping that drill bit nice and clean at the tip, and just go for that 3mm depth. As I said, just very carefully, if it begins to snag and a little bit of catch on the edge of the drill, just sort of withdraw it, retwist it, and start again. Don't force it is the key here. So just very gentle, very limited pressure. Let the drill bit do the work for you, and just let it follow that pilot hole that you've drilled with that 1mm. Keep checking it for depth, making sure that it's looking on track and is as central as possible. If it is a little bit off center, there's enough catch on the magnet, enough strength and pull on the magnet not to make it too big a deal. Just try and avoid going too near the edge. If you can line it up a bit better than I can by eye, my eyes are not as good as they used to be, but you should be fine. So pretty happy with that. We can now look at orientation of the magnet. So I'm going to take one of the other weapons that I've pre-built, and I'm going to attach that a stack of magnets to that, and then take the upper shoulder arm, apply a bit of glue into that. I'm using Gorilla Super Glue Gel for this because it's a little bit more controllable. And then I'm going to press the end of that stack of magnet in, and if we're at 3mm deep, that should be fine. There is a little bit of a lip on this though, so once it's as far as you can get there with your hand, I suggest grabbing another device. I'm going to use the end of a paintbrush and just press that magnet in flush before the glue begins to set. So once it's flush, we're good to go. Reversing that process for the arm then, for the actual weapon itself, take that stack of magnets, stick it to the upper arm, and then press it into the gap that you've got. And then because this one has no lip, you can press it against a solid desk, and that will give it a full flush fit. And just to prove that I've got the orientation right, because sometimes I do make an error, I'm just testing it with those other weapons to make sure it's fully optional and correct. Once that's magnetised, then you can work out a little bit of a pose. So taking the legs and torso together, that you've I haven't glued the torso at this stage to paint easier, but you can now work on a pose. Now at this point, people are going, why haven't you cleaned your resin? You're an idiot. At this point, this is when I clean the resin, because you've done most of the assembly, and providing you can still get your toothbrush into all the gaps for the paint adhesion and clean off any mould release, I think is a little bit easier than lots of little fiddly pieces that you're going to get your hands all over. And as soon as you put your hands back on that dry resin again, you're going to impart oil from your skin, and that's probably just not as good. So I've partially assembled enough to be able to clean this. This is just warm dishwater soap, you know, just sort of fairy liquid kind of stuff. I left it overnight, and then I drained it off, and then I did it again. And then all I'm going to do is put it onto some tissue paper and allow it to dry overnight. I don't accelerate the drying with a hairdryer. You can do if you really want to, on a very gentle heat. But I'm just going to leave all the components on there and come back a day later. So I'm just going to leave that to dry. You can turn them over halfway through if you've got a bit of time, just to let that water run off onto the towel. It's just a regular piece of kitchen towel. And then 24 hours later, we are ready to prime. Now I'm going to stick all the pieces onto a piece of fairly rigid cardboard using some blue tack, and that's going to enable the pressure from the spray can not to blow the components off. And then I'm going to go out into the back garden, and then I'm going to prime the model. I'm going to go with a regular can of black. I don't use GW spray cans. I think they're a little bit expensive. I use a company called Highcoat. I buy them at about 12 cans a time, because I do paint an awful lot, and that makes the cans just around about the £3 a tin mark. Do be wary of using sort of car paints and so on, because they can obliterate a bit of detail, and these models, these resin kits, especially this one, are covered in a lot of detail. So another day later, I have now sprayed the models black, very gingerly, a couple of very fine mist coats, and then the final coat allowing it to dry thoroughly between. And then I've just applied a bit of that garden wire again into a hole on the foot, placed it into a cork on one of these grips. This is going to be a subtle plug here. That is a Garfy Get a Grip, which you can find on eBay. He's a very close personal friend of mine, been in the hobby forever. You'll often find him on Instagram. I'll leave his Instagram handles and so on in the description below. But he was very kindly sent me a couple of these to use. But yeah, pretty good for doing stuff like this. And they have all kinds of shims to fit all kinds of base sizes if you're interested in that kind of thing. So we are now priming the model in the the base coat of the model, and I'm using GW Thousand Suns Blue, which matches all the rest of my army. If you've seen my recent video, showcase video of the other Contemptor Dreadnought I've done, this is exactly how I've painted that. So airbrushing, you can hand brush if you really want to, multiple thin coats to avoid brush strokes, but for speed, ease and smoothness of finish, I am using an airbrush. So this is Thousand Suns Blue mixed with a little bit of that X20A Tamiya thinner. There are plenty of other thinners, acrylic thinners on the market. Just use them as you have them available. And this is going to take about 2 to 3 coats. I run it quite thin, which means it can get quite runny if you don't use it on a low enough pressure and be very, very careful with it. You can run it a bit thicker. It just depends on your nozzle type on your airbrush. So yeah, I think this was 3 coats later. We now have a very solid Thousand Suns Blue base coat applied to the Contemptor Dreadnought. And we're going to kind of call it there for this bit of the video, because I'm aware that time is ticking. But this is the stage we've got to. And just to prove that you can do it on other vehicles exactly the same, I've got a demolisher, which I'm going to be painting up alongside the Contemptor to show the same techniques being applied to a more blocky and a less detailed vehicle. So that's going to wrap up this video of the full build, magnetising guide, and all the way up to base coat on the Osiron Thousand Suns Dreadnought from Forgeworld. And as I've shown, I'm going to be running this on a demolisher as well, just for good measure, just to sort of show you the same kind of techniques that I'm going to be using on that more blockier type of model. You can apply the same techniques to Rhinos, to Land Raiders, or whatever. And I kind of thought I'd run that in parallel. It also means that I'm not wasting any paint, and I can run 2 models at the same time. But I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you learned something new. There will be a second part, obviously, as we go through finishing off the model, bringing it up to the same standard as the other Contemptor Dreadnought that I've done. The link for that is in the description below as well. But I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, don't forget to like, comment and subscribe. And I shall catch you guys on the next video.